Welcome to the Cheat Code Corner podcast, where we hit you with the cheat codes to help you advance in the areas that you care about. I'm your host, DC, and today we have a unique guest today, Joe Anuta, my man, who I am so pleased to join, for you to join. How are you doing, Joe?
Not too bad. What makes me unique?
Well, I'll tell you what makes you unique. And actually, I was really glad that you joined the podcast. So one of the things that I found, and you're a journalist. The interesting thing about a journalist at POLITICO New York, by the way, is the journey that it takes for you to reach where you are today. So my understanding when I was kind of looking at your CV is that you started out doing some weeklies at Times Ledger, and you were doing that for a few years. Then you elevated over to Crain's, right? And then you finally reached POLITICO. Now, I know, I was in media relations, that I know how difficult and how competitive it is in the journalistic world of periodicals. So one of the things that I found very interesting is the fact of you being able to elevate from the dailies all the way up to POLITICO, which is like a major newspaper. So I was really interested to bring you on because I really want to understand what it took to get there and what it's taken to really succeed and to maintain your position out there.
Yeah, definitely. Makes
sense. Cool, man. So why don't we start first? First things first, right? How did you exactly break into it was Times Ledger newspapers, right? So, and you had mentioned that they owned a bunch of dailies. Is that right, in New York City?
It's sort of complicated. So really what happened was I moved here and I had a pretty good, stable of clips. I did a lot of internships and stuff in college, which was very helpful. I just wrote a lot. And then even when I moved here, I sort of created this stupid little blog that it was just me kind of like riffing on news stories and stuff. I didn't have sources or anything. I was just sort of going around to anyone who would sort of take my call. And I sent my resume and called this editor in Brooklyn, and he gave me an internship there. And I worked there for maybe a couple months and stuff. And then he ended up calling the editor in Queens, and he got me that job, basically.
In the world of journalism, where it's super competitive, where almost it seems like tons of people have a microphone, right? Where people can write, and there's a lot of platforms for that. Can you explain how you were able to, what made Joe so special, his work so special, that you were able to elevate from the weeklies over to Crain's, which Crain's, it's a huge paper. It's not, it's not a small one. So, how did you make that jump?
I think for me, there's just a lot you can do, I think, with a local reporting job. I really I just wrote a lot, really hustled. But I think what set me apart in people's eyes at Crain's was, I guess, probably two main things that I would do. One is I really like documents in
what do you mean you like documents? What do you mean document? What does that even mean? Who likes documents? What does that mean?
Yeah, there's nothing like a good document. Because if you cover New York, there's just paperwork is generated. You couldn't believe how much paperwork is generated just running a city. It's insane.
Okay.
And there's a huge opportunity if you're a reporter, depending on what you're covering, to sort of dig into this. There's all sorts of stuff people might not tell you, but they have to write down somewhere. And I always felt that there's a huge sort of stack of stuff that no one really looks through on a regular basis. So I was just able to find interesting stuff sometimes in, I'll give you an example. There were a few big real estate projects going on in my beat. I was covering just a neighborhood beat. So usually no one, there's going to be a limited audience of who's going to care about what I'm writing about. But there were these pretty big development projects that started to get some citywide attention, and they were being covered by bigger papers. And so,
you mean like New York Times or Wall Street Journal, or just bigger papers in general? Okay.
Yeah. So bigger city papers. At the time, I was at a weekly and the dailies were covering them. So that would be the Daily News, New York Post, Wall Street Journal and the New York Times.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
So they, some of them had taken an interest in Crain's, I should say. Some of them had taken an interest in this project, and I was able to really dig in. Like, I was going to all the community board meetings every week. Not the citywide reporters were not really doing that. It was sort of like being a locally based reporter kind of became an asset in some ways for this story, because when you do a big rezoning project, you have to do all these like scoping documents. Like, I could bore you with a lot of acronyms that I will never be able to get out of my brain now. I know a lot about this stuff because I was really in the weeds, and like, people took notice when I would break stories about kind of this weird stuff I found. And like, the more you do that, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, people would then come to me with even more nerdy documents than the ones I could find.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. So what I'm hearing then, right? So, all right, you throw your hat in. There's this big, I guess, like you said, there's this big like development, for instance, right? So that's covered by the big boy papers already, right? And so then you decide, all right, so you're going to like just read up on your documents. Is that just to get a different angle so that you actually really consumed a lot of that stuff? So you had a better understanding of the problem or the issues. Is that what you're saying? You did that, and then you went to the community board meetings, and people saw your face. So it kind of just, you know what I mean? You became a familiar face within those worlds.
I mean, there's news in the documents. I'm telling you, they're invaluable. I love them. Like, you dig, will be like, there'll be like a 30-page report. Oh, they had to publish this report on a certain day. I would actually go through and read the report. And let's say, for example, like this would actually happen, but it would be like, by the way, they're going to finish this one important piece of the project next month. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a piece of news that I go and report, and everyone says, oh, how did you find that out?
Yeah. Well, it's actually so funny you mentioned that. So one of the things that I do, and like, I work in digital advertising, so I have clients and stuff, and I have to prospect, but I also have to obviously service my clients that I have. And a lot of the clients that I have are public companies. What I do is I'll read their 10K or their annual reports. You got all types of information in that. You know what I mean? Like, not only just their competitors, but like what the C-suite, what they're focusing on, obviously the earnings, and all that stuff that people don't want to listen to. When you actually dive into that stuff, into your documents, you can actually learn a lot either about your clients, about your industry, and that can really give you a heads up on just a lot of information that could be helpful when you're trying to like do anything, whether it's trying to get a new clients or what have you. So it sounds like you were able to review your documents, and that puts you in a position where you just had a lot of knowledge to be able to so you would just write based on that stuff. So you're saying that got you noticed? That got you noticed while you were working at the weeklies? That got you noticed to get the job at Crain's?
I mean, that was one of my bigger stories that I did. And it was sort of like there were other people doing this too, right?
Yeah.
They sort of, like, fellow document nerds can kind of recognize each other. So there would be people who would reach out to me. I remember one time, this guy was like, "Oh, I have some documents that you might." and like, someone picked me up at a car, and we went to like a junkyard, like scrap metal yard.
With a stranger? You went to a junkyard with a stranger?
I talked to this person on the phone before, but I can't remember if I had met them in person.
That's weird.
Yeah, we drive to this like junkyard. We walk through, and there's like a trailer. And open the door, and there's like
lots of documents.
Interesting things, but they gave me this big binder full of stuff that was great, and I used it for a story.
Yeah,
you don't need sources to do that. Like, you can find news and stuff. Like, if you go digging, it's even on like a more broad level. Like, the city puts out a newspaper every day called the City Record, and it's just like filled with it's filled with contracts and procurement and community board meetings and rezonings. And that's just sort of like surface level. And like, beneath that is a whole sea of stuff that, if you're just starting out and you're trying to get some unique stories, some scoops, like, it's a good way to go, because I think it helps you get sources if you don't have any. So for me, that was, it was helpful. I remember probably, I did this story one time. The police department was building a new training facility in Queens, and people were concerned that they were going to, I think I'm remembering this correctly. They were going to kill a bunch of trees to build this facility, and people were outraged. And this is like, if you're a local news reporter, a tree getting cut down, big deal.
Big deal.
And this was like a whole street full of them. And the city said, well, the trees were all dead anyway. You know, it's bad soil underneath. So we're actually not killing them. We're taking them out, and then we're going to plant new ones. It's actually going to be better for you. And so I was able to find the tree inspection report, which was a document written down, and someone like, I don't know when, had gone and reviewed every tree and sort of written down its health, and they were all healthy. They were going to murder scores, potentially, of healthy trees, which I think they did anyway, but at least, you know.
Benefits of, diving in. All right. I was kind of curious about some of the difficulties like being a journalist. Like, and kind of your experience there, because I think when you started becoming a journalist, and when I started out with sales, like our salaries, like we don't make much cash, like when you break in. So I like, that's something like, at least for a salesperson, you know, like our bases are so low when we first start out. At least when I started out, my base was super low. So it's kind of hard to make to survive.
Yeah.
And so you're like really grinding for a long time. I mean, so was that kind of your experience too for a while?
Yeah, I mean, really grinding, and some days you're just like, is this ever going to pay off? Should I just quit? And it's just long hours. Because, you know, it was like working at the weekly, you're sort of, you're not making that much money. And you got to sort of do the local stories, right? Like you're always going to have to write about the potholes and, you know, just like, I remember there was a story like someone never trimmed their hedges and they would like grow into their neighbor's yard. And like, that was a story.
Yeah, so you have to write that stuff. Yeah. Well, it's local stuff, right?
Yeah, it's local stuff. And I went in, did they get a violation? Checked all the documents. But so you're doing all that stuff. Then you have to go to all these community board meetings, stuff after hours. And then you sort of, for me at least, plotting like the more interesting, bigger stories that are going to get me out of here and get me to another publication. So yeah, it's a real grind.
What made you stick with it though? Like what made you just decide, like, because like you said, you had been to grind for a while, probably the base, you know what I mean? Salary was not that high for a while. I mean, now you got your own place in Brooklyn, you know, you got your motorcycle, you got your event space, you know, you're doing your music. Yeah. I mean, everything has come together, but like, which took a little bit of time, but what allowed you to stick with it? Like, what did you say to yourself every day to kind of keep it pushing?
I think, you know, I had some people encourage me, like other reporters and stuff, and my editor. And I don't know, like there was a growth happening, I guess. Like I could see myself getting better as well. It didn't really make sense to quit when I was getting better at it. And, you know, it was I think I spent 3.5 years at the weekly, which, you know, it felt like a long time because again, I'm not making any money. And living in Queens, you had to have a car, and it was just like broken. The air conditioning didn't work.
Yeah.
I had to like unbutton my shirt and to drive to events because like I'd be so sweaty.
So that was the grind, man. That's what you was doing for a while. So I mean, you said you got some encouragement. I mean, so now obviously you started to jump a little bit. So I mean, what do you like about journalism? What do you like about, you know, about the space, and what keeps you there?
I mean, it's not always fun. Like that's kind of the wrong word, but in another way it is. Like it's super interesting. You just like kind of never know what's going to happen. I'm supposed to be telling you what's going to happen. So it's just super interesting. And I like kind of being in the mix. Like I feel like the press, like, I'm covering government now. It just has like an important role to play in how government works. And like, I'm not saying I write like all exclusives every day, but I kind of feel like sometimes if I didn't ask a question of this person who's in charge of some aspect of of government, like no one else would be asking it.
You mentioned, your ability to, you liking documents, right?
Yeah.
You liking documents, you put in the work in terms of like going to those meetings and the weekly meetings and things like that, right? Obviously, you talk about bringing a different angle to your stories. I mean, what else would you say is something that maybe a skill that you've honed that has kind of helped you to be successful there? I mean, someone once told me that the way you develop, like you have a knack with developing sources, is my understanding, and that's helped you. Like you really leaned into that, and that's helped you a lot too. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's like that's for me. They never really taught me that, like how to. I guess it's hard to teach. Like, how do you talk and be personable to people?
Right.
I guess you just have to do it. But I don't know. It's strange. Like, I've definitely learned a lot over the last 10 years that I've been doing this.
Yeah.
It's I guess something I didn't realize until way super late is just the people you're talking to don't think like reporters. Like, I could be talking to someone about whatever, some story like Damien didn't trim his hedges, and so I'm going to do a story about it. And this person could be talking to me, and the next day, the biggest story in the city could break, and this person knew about it, and they didn't tell me. And I could call them up and be like, "Why didn't you tell me this thing was happening?"
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't think you'd want to know. I'm like, of course I want to know.
Right. Yeah.
That's just not how people are. Like, they're not reporters. Sometimes you have to just keep asking them questions. It's just a strange process to get news out of people.
So how would you say then, how have you become personable and charming to people? I mean, what steps have you taken that you think has helped you to really be able to cultivate a lot of sources? Because that's not easy. I mean, especially if people don't like talking to anybody nowadays. I mean, people don't mind talking, but they usually talk fluff, right? So even on the sales side, right? Everyone thinks that I'm immediately trying to sell something to someone, which I kind of am, but am I really going to sell something to you that you don't really want? You know what I mean? Typically, when I'm talking to clients, I'm really just saying look, these are the 5 options in the market. We happen to be one of them. This is the pros and the cons. You know what I mean? Either you if this is going to work, but I don't feel as though speaking with clients often though, it's very difficult to get them to share actually what matters. Cause I guess they think I'm going to take that information and do something with it.
Yeah.
Somehow use it against them. So people are oftentimes a little defensive, or they just don't share what really matters until it takes a while to do that. So, I mean, how have you been able to when you're speaking to someone trying to extract information, they obviously know that you're a journalist hunting for information, but how do you accelerate the process so that you can get some real good, content?
Yeah. I mean, I guess my whole job is finding out stuff I'm not supposed to know and then telling as many people as possible.
Yeah.
It can be hard. But I guess what I've learned is sort of, I don't know, just be a little more relaxed. I was too uptight before, when I was sort of in my early days. But now, you're not I guess some sources there's a weird, you're not friends, but you have some sort of relationship with these people. So just a little more relaxed and talk, ask them how their weekend was and stuff that I didn't really do before, but I know much more about people's personal lives now than I did before.
That stuff matters, man. That stuff matters.
You got to remember, I just think if you want to sort of instill trust in someone, you kind of have to put more of yourself out there than I was doing. I was sort of kind of very stilted and sort of by the books before.
Yeah.
I just try and it's sort of a two-way street.
I love that, Joe, man. Well, listen, I so appreciate you coming, stopping by, because the thing is, right, not everyone has access to whether it's journalists or entrepreneurs or CEOs and things like that. So a lot of the whole point of the podcast really is not only to be exposed to different folks, but also to understand, what have they done? How have they gotten there? What have they done to be successful? And so a lot of the insight that you shared is this type of things that a lot of people, including myself, like don't really understand or don't know what it takes. So this is the type of information that's super helpful. So listen, towards the end of this, all the podcasts, I always have this thing called power questions. It's like 5 quick questions designed to kind of extract some information just about who you are as a person. So you're not supposed to think too much about them. This is supposed to be kind of rapid fire. All right.
Yeah.
Ready? All right, cool. Number 1, Joseph, how many hours of sleep do you get?
I'd say like usually 7.
7? It's not bad. What's your diet like?
To be honest, it hasn't been great lately. Summertime, I'm going to get back into cooking more. Probably not the pack my lunch and dinner level again, but a little bit more home cooked meals would be nice.
Home cooking, love it. Favorite activity to unwind, and you can't say music since I know you play music.
I do kickboxing.
There we go. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I guess like teleport, you know.
You got to pick another one.
Fly around, I guess.
All right, Superman. All right, fair enough. And what are you reading or listening to?
Reading. I read like a bunch of mostly nonfiction now. So I'm reading this like political science book about why people sort of have the opinions that they do about government, and then one about policing. And I'm listening to this guy. This album came out a little bit ago, but I haven't really listened to a lot of new stuff lately. His name is Do Mokhtar. He's from Niger. He's like does a lot of guitar stuff. That's a terrible description, but you should listen to it. It's good.
What's his name?
Do Mokhtar.
Cool. So I'll check him out.
Yeah.
And then Joe, listen, if somebody wanted to contact you, what would be the easiest way or the best way for them to reach out?
You can find my email on the Politico website. It's just j@politico.com.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Joe, for stopping by the Cheat Code Corner. Really appreciate the time, man. Really love the conversation. Appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
What's good, fam? It's time for the recap of Joe Anuta, the journalist at Politico. So there were really 2 cheat codes that I wanted to talk about that really came to mind that Joe brought to the table. So number 1 is the importance of deep research. So Joe talked about how he likes documents, that he reads a lot of documents about different stories. You can actually apply this to a lot of the different things that you do. So for example, when I'm prospecting or reaching out to clients, a lot of what I do is I might read the annual reports, any articles or news articles written by the company. What that can do is help you to better understand what's going on with that company, or if you're researching something about an industry or a person, you want to really figure out what's going on with that person. So whether it's reading journals, whether it's articles, whether it's going to Wikipedia, do your research and gain as much information as possible about the subject, about the person. That can really help you stand out because you would have shown, hey, that you did research, that you took this subject seriously. Number 2, the other thing he talks about sourcing different sources. That's really just kind of like networking as well. But here's the thing that I really like that he talked about, which was how to do sourcing. And so one of the things he talked about is, hey, when you're reaching out, and you can do this through LinkedIn, whether it's getting a referral from somebody, identify somebody that you think is valuable, that you want to gain some insight from. And when you reach out to them, obviously, the way you can do that, you can say, hey, obviously introduce yourself and say, hey, you'd love to get their opinion on this thing or this particular subject. Honor them, show them that, you really appreciate their opinion, and you can, probably get something out of that. Like you can actually kind of gain their insight. So those are the 2 quick things. Do your research, be really comprehensive, and find little nuggets about subjects or people. And then when you're reaching out to somebody, honor them by saying, hey, I'd love to get your take or your opinion on this. I know that you're an expert in this field. And so what do you think about X or Y? All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful. And until the next time, take care.